They used to say I was the quiet one, the calm in a family that fed on noise. Maybe that's why they thought I didn't feel things the way they did. But silence doesn't mean you stop hurting. It just means you've learned there's no point screaming when no one's listening. I spent years letting their laughter scrape against my patience, pretending indifference while they dressed their cruelty as charm. And somewhere between their jokes and my restraint, I disappeared, not all at once, just piece by piece, until even my name sounded small in their mouths. But tonight, as I watched my sister smile like she'd already won, something in me went still, not angry, not bitter, just done. They don't know it yet, but the silence they taught me to keep is about to speak for itself. The afternoon light slid through the blinds and brushed across my desk. Soft enough to make the edges of the paper glow, on top of the case files sat an envelope I'd already opened 3 times. White cardstock, embossed letters, perfume that lingered too long. Inside, the words curved in gold. Don't wear anything too serious. Sis, we want to keep it light. It wasn't the kind of line that wounded on the surface. It cut slower, like memory. I placed the invitation between 2 folders, marked confidential, and let the contrast sit there. Sharp and deliberate, the world where truth mattered, and the one where appearance always won. The drive to Bainbridge Island took me across the Agate Pass Bridge, where fog clung low to the water and houses looked curated rather than lived in. The air was cold enough to keep the windows closed, but clear enough to see the masts of idle sailboats. Somewhere between the gray sky and the rhythm of the wipers, I thought about how people greet me with your honor in court. But at home, I've always been the problem no one admits exists. By the time I parked near the glass estate, the string quartet had already begun. Laughter floated through the open doors like perfume. Expensive, excessive, and exhausting. My mother spotted me first. Her voice trembled slightly when she said, "You made it. Try not to be too serious tonight." Lila appeared a moment later, sequins catching every light in the room. She hugged me just long enough for the cameras, her breath warm against my ear. "Didn't think you'd actually leave the courtroom for this." The crowd smiled, their laughter neat and polite. I stepped back, blending into the soft chatter, the flash of phones, the choreography of pretense. And then, behind me, a voice, low and familiar, cut through the noise. "Judge Morgan, isn't it?" I turned. Ethan Price, Lila's fiancé. His smile was practiced, but his eyes flickered once. Recognition surfacing like something he'd tried to bury. I'd seen that look before, on witnesses who swore to tell the truth, and never did. Laughter always came easy to my sister, even when she was caught lying. She had that smile, bright, rehearsed, just shy of innocent, and somehow it bent every rule in her favor. I still remember us in the backyard of our Spokane house, the dry grass sticking to our knees as she spun another excuse to avoid helping with chores. Mom would shake her head, laugh, and call her clever. When I pointed out that cleverness wasn't the same as honesty, Mom sighed and told me not to be so difficult. That word, difficult, clung to me for years. The night our parents separated, that old wall clock fell from the hallway nail and shattered, its glass face split clean across the middle. No one picked it up. I stayed with Dad. She went with Mom, and the house divided neatly in 2, one half chasing light, the other learning to live without it. I still hear that clock sometimes in dreams, stuck between seconds, hands frozen just before midnight. Now, in the warm buzz of her engagement party, everything about Lila sparkled. The sequined dress, the crowd leaning toward her stories, the effortless way she commanded attention. Mom hovered nearby, proud and flushed, introducing her as my youngest, the star of the family. I stood near the back, glass in hand, the music threading around me like static. A woman leaned over, curious. "You're in law, right?" I nodded, keeping my voice measured. "I work in the justice system." I didn't elaborate. Ethan joined us then, his voice smooth but cautious. "Small world," he said. "I was once involved in a big case, but everything worked out fine. His smile was polite. His eyes weren't. There was something about the way he avoided my gaze that triggered a memory I didn't want to touch. A few tables away, someone mentioned Northwest Trust stock. The name hit me like a bell. I remembered the sterile chill of a courtroom, the hum of fluorescent lights, and Ethan on the witness stand, calm, confident, untouchable. He'd walked away clean that day. Not enough evidence, they'd said. But I'd seen the truth. Half buried beneath polished statements and missing paperwork, the string quartet shifted to a livelier tune. Laughter swelled again, but it all sounded distant. I moved toward the window for air, needing space. That's when I saw them, Mom and Ethan, standing near the glass wall. Her hand rested on his arm, her voice low but sharp enough to carry. "Don't let the past ruin this wedding," she said. I stood there, a few steps away, my reflection merging with theirs in the glass. The sea shimmered behind us, black and endless. So it wasn't just me, after all. In this family, silence had always been the language of survival. Dinner shimmered under candlelight, the kind of light that flatters everyone. The table gleamed with silver, laughter, and the shallow comfort of people who need to be seen. Lila told one of her stories, the kind where truth bends just enough to make her look endearing. "When we were kids," she said, "my sister tattled because I helped a friend during a quiz. She thought I was cheating." The crowd chuckled, Mom included, shaking her head like it was an adorable misunderstanding. I lifted my glass, but didn't drink. The glass wall beside me reflected the entire room. Lila glowing at the center, Ethan beside her, Mom leaning in to listen, and then me, off to the side, a darker shape in the reflection. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from watching your family from the outside of the light. I've spent my whole life in that shadow, and somehow it feels safer there. Ethan started talking about his work, his tone too casual to be comfortable. "I used to be with Northwest Trust," he said. "Just a small role." A woman at the end of the table laughed softly. "Wasn't that the bank with that scandal years ago?" He smiled, practiced and tight. "Rumors travel faster than facts." The air thinned. Mom's hand twitched against her wineglass. Lila forced a laugh that didn't land. I set my glass down and slipped out onto the terrace. The night air was cooler, cleaner. Through the reflection in the glass, I saw the three of them again, huddled close, speaking quickly. Mom's voice rose just enough to reach me. "Your sister doesn't understand. She only knows rules, not love." I rested my fingertips on the railing, listening to the waves below. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe telling the truth was the only kind of love I'd ever known. I tapped the rim of my glass once, a quiet sound swallowed by the wind, but in my mind it echoed like a gavel against wood, soft, final, inevitable. Dinner shimmered in the kind of light that flatters people who have nothing to hide. Candles flickered down the center of the long table, their reflections trembling on the crystal. Lila sat perfectly framed between Ethan and our mother, her hand resting lightly on his, as if she could anchor herself to his perfection. I sat at the far end, a half step outside the conversation, the one face catching the full glare of the chandelier. From there, I could see everything, the laughter, the performance, the choreography of a family pretending not to fracture. Lila lifted her glass, voice bright. "Remember when my sister filed a report because I borrowed her coat?" she said. The table laughed. Someone joked that I might sue him for stealing the silverware. The laughter spread. Too loud. Too eager. Ethan smiled along, but I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. I set my glass down, the stem cold against my palm. Sometimes keeping the rules isn't about pride. It's about respect. The laughter faltered, for a beat. All anyone could hear was the hum of the quartet. A man down the table leaned forward, recognition in his eyes. "Morgan, right? You presided over the Kenworth case, didn't you?" I nodded. Ethan's fingers tightened around Lila's hand until she winced. Then a woman's voice rose, cheerful and oblivious. "Oh, that's where I know her. She's famous for being relentless." The air shifted. Light drained from the laughter. Lila's smile turned brittle. My sisters always liked control, she said softly, even when we were kids. I tapped my glass against the table. One sharp sound, clean as a gavel. Ethan flinched. I met his eyes across the candlelight. You shouldn't get too close to the light if you're still hiding something. His hand shook as he poured more wine. The red spilled, seeping across the white linen like blood through gauze. Lila forced a laugh. You see? She takes everything too seriously. No, I said quietly. You just don't understand what it costs to stay honest. A gust from the ocean slipped through the open doors, snuffing out a few candles. For a second, the room dimmed. Warmth thinned to something colder. Truth pushing against the edges of all that perfect glass. The music kept playing, but no one was listening anymore. The laughter that once floated through the air now fell flat, uneven, like a record skipping on the same broken note. A few guests had begun whispering, snippets of Northwest Trust, trial, witness. Lila smiled too brightly. Ethan dabbed sweat from his neck, and my mother drank her wine too fast, pretending it steadied her hands. From my seat, I studied them all, the glittering performance starting to dim. When laughter loses rhythm, justice tends to find its cue, I thought. And it had just stepped into the room. Ethan caught my arm as I passed through the hallway. His grip was sharp, voice lowered. If you say anything about the past, you'll destroy this family. Your mother knows that too. I met his stare, my tone even. I'm not destroying anything. I'm cleaning up what you left behind. He scoffed. You don't understand. I kept quiet to protect everyone, to stop the system from collapsing. No, I said softly. You kept quiet to protect yourself. The light from the glass wall split his reflection in half, one side bright, the other drowned in shadow. Back in the main room, the first domino fell. A local journalist stood near the bar, phone in hand. Around the table, guests started searching names. Judge Isley Morgan and Ethan Price Northwest Trust. Faces changed as screens lit up with old headlines. Witness in embezzlement trial. A silence spread, thick and heavy, like the moment before a verdict. An older woman turned to Lila, her voice careful. Sweetheart, is that true? Did he used to be part of that case? Color drained from Lila's face. She looked at Ethan, then at our mother, and finally at me. The room had transformed, no longer a celebration, but a courtroom. Warm light turned cold. Every phone camera a spotlight. Ethan forced a laugh. Those stories aren't true. Tabloids make up anything. But the more he spoke, the more his words trembled. Mom rose halfway from her chair, whispering to me, Please, don't make this worse. Everyone's watching. I don't have to, I said quietly. They're seeing it on their own. Lila slammed her glass against the table. Enough! This is my engagement party, not a trial. Someone nearby, half drunk, laughed nervously. But isn't your sister a judge? I think I've seen her on the news. All eyes turned to me. The room stilled. Yes, I said, voice calm but final. And I once sat across from your fiancé in court. Ethan's hand froze midair. His glass slipped, shattered. The sound cracked through the silence like a gavel. No one touched me. No one spoke. For the first time in my life, silence stood on my side. The quiet didn't last. It fractured, splintering into panic. People split into tribes. Those defending Lila, those escaping the scene, and those filming from behind their screens. My mother's hand found mine. You just humiliated your own blood, she whispered, trembling. No, I said. I just took off the mask they've been wearing. Ethan shot up, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone. She's lying. She's bitter because she lost to me once. His words cracked the air and exposed him. He hadn't been my rival, just a witness who'd almost perjured himself. The lie was clumsy, and everyone knew it. The journalist raised his phone again, recording this time. Within minutes, the room buzzed with alerts. Hashtags climbing across screens. Judge Morgan, Northwest Trust. Lila turned on our mother, her voice breaking. You knew, didn't you? You knew everything. Mom looked down. Her silence was confession enough. Lila faced me then, eyes glistening. You stayed quiet all these years, just waiting for this? I shook my head slowly. No. I stayed quiet until I didn't need to anymore. Her wine glass tipped, the red spilling down her silver dress, blooming like a wound. For a second, she looked like the reflection of Ethan's stain hours earlier, two halves of the same truth. A man near the back, a retired banker, finally spoke. I remember now. Ethan Price was investigated, and she, Judge Morgan, was the one who signed the warrant. The words fell heavy as verdicts. Ethan lurched toward the door, stumbling. His phone hit the floor, lighting up with a message across the screen. Delete everything before they find it. I rose from my chair, folded my napkin, and placed it neatly on the table. I don't need applause, I said softly. I just need to stop pretending. Silence swallowed the room again. Lila's voice came last, trembling. You always win, don't you? No, I said. I just don't run. Flashes burst behind me as I walked toward the door. Each click of my heels echoed like a gavel against marble, measured, final, irrevocable. By morning, the storm had gone digital. My name filled headlines and hashtags, the story framed like a scandal instead of a reckoning. Judge Morgan exposes hidden scandal at sister's engagement. News vans lined the curb outside my building in Seattle. Their lenses pointed at my front door. Waiting for a reaction I refused to give. Inside, the apartment was still. The only sound was the steady tick of the clock on the wall, an old rhythm that felt like the heart of a courtroom, still beating even after the crowd had gone home. On the news, commentators debated what I'd done. Some called me brave, a woman unafraid to choose truth over blood. Others called me cruel, accusing me of airing family shame in public. I scrolled for a moment, watching strangers argue about the cost of integrity, then shut the screen. Justice doesn't need an audience. It only needs enough silence to hear itself breathe. That evening, my mother arrived, clutching a paper bag that crinkled in her hands. Inside were 2 photographs of Lila and me as children, smiling at a world that hadn't learned to disappoint us yet. She said softly that she'd believed silence was protection, but all it ever did was leave me alone. I told her I understood. Her silence had been fear, mine had been a choice. She wept quietly, saying she was proud of me, though she wished it could have hurt less. I almost smiled. Justice never promises comfort. I said, it only promises truth. Before leaving, she paused at the door and asked if I regretted it. I looked out the window where rain blurred the city lights and said, no, just tired. And in that exhaustion, I finally understood. When victory no longer mattered, justice began to look a lot like mercy. The morning headlines cracked like thunder through the quiet. FBI reopens Northwest Trust case after new evidence surfaces. Ethan's face appeared beneath the headline. Eyes half blinked, mouth set in a smirk that had finally run out of luck. The news anchors read the emails that had leaked from his phone. One line echoed through every broadcast. Keep her quiet. She's the judge. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had spent years using silence to hide behind, and now it was silence itself that exposed him. Later that day, Lila went home to our mother's house, stripped of sequins and smiles. The woman who once thrived under attention looked smaller now, her gray sweater swallowing the light. Mom asked what she planned to do next. Lila's voice was rough but steady. I used to think love meant protecting people with lies. Now I know the only way to protect them is with truth. By nightfall, her engagement was officially over. She posted a public apology to my sister and to the truth I refused to see. A week later, an envelope arrived at my office. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I understand now. Isley, I can't lie anymore, not to anyone, not to myself. The morning sun caught the edge of the note, and the light spilled across my desk, soft and unbroken. The same glass that once reflected deceit now let the truth shine through. Months passed. I saw her again, in photos, volunteering with women rebuilding their lives after financial betrayal. Beneath one picture she'd written, "Silence can destroy, but it can also heal." We had both learned to be quiet again, not to hide, but to listen. Early spring softened the island, washing away the sharpness of winter. The sea was calm again, its rhythm steady against the shore. I returned to Bainbridge with no agenda, just a quiet need to see what peace might feel like. Mom had set a simple dinner on the wooden porch, the table open to the sound of waves. Lila was already there when I arrived, dressed plainly, her face bare of pretense. We ate together as gulls drifted over the water, their cries carried by the wind. No one mentioned the past. The silence between us felt different now, less like distance, more like understanding. Lila's voice was soft when she finally spoke. If you hadn't said it, I might never have seen who I really was. Sometimes, I said, the truth doesn't destroy us. It just tears away the skin we outgrew. Mom smiled faintly, eyes glinting with light from the sea. You're both like the ocean, she said. Restless when stirred, but always finding your way back to calm. The sunset poured gold over the water, catching in the glass panels of the porch. I watched the horizon blur, the tide rising and falling in its patient rhythm. There are verdicts that don't need gavels or witnesses, only time and the courage to stand still. The wind brushed through my hair. 3 waves broke against the rocks below, soft and final, like the world closing its case. I stood at the gate, listening to my father's voice echo from inside before I even saw him. He was laughing, the kind of laugh that fills a room when everything feels perfectly in place. Someone mentioned my name, and he answered.